Good evening. On behalf of the commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the November 26, 2024 City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying and advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable television franchises, and other matters related to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to the operation or rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint power agencies as the city may be a member of or which relate to such utility enterprises. At this time, I would like to ask that everyone please put your electronic devices on silent. Commissioner DeMarchi, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pam, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner DeLacy?
Here.
Commissioner DeMarchi?
Here.
Commissioner Knox?
Here.
Commissioner Maish?
Here.
Commissioner Springer? Here. Commissioner Webb?
Here.
And Chair Bilski.
Here.
Thank you.
Item 4 on the agenda is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. Anyone? All right. Item 5.1 is the approval of the October 22nd, 2024 meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Abstention.
Okay. One abstention. Okay. So the minutes are approved. Okay. Next item on the agenda is requests and presentations. Item 6.1, Environmental Utilities Monthly Update. Devin Woodington was scheduled to report the monthly status of the environmental utilities activities. However, he was unavailable this evening, so Jason Marks, process engineer for EU, will do our report tonight. This item is for information.
All right. Well, welcome. Yes, as I mentioned, I'm Jason Marks, process engineer. I lead our technical services and our CIP group, which we'll be talking about today. But I wanted to give a couple updates for the monthly updates. Number one, I'd like to give congratulations to our director, Rich Plecker, is retiring after 10 years with the city. So his last day will be December 27th, and I think he's immediately taking a month-long vacation, so good for him. But there's an open recruitment for his position that's ongoing right now. So, couple other smaller updates. We're currently working through rates. We look at rates every 2 years. This is the year. So we're kind of in the early stages of that. I believe we're coming back in about February to provide a more detailed update on rates. So, but we're starting that process now. Wanted to give a quick update on one of our cool programs that we did. Last year we did the first annual Soup for Succulent program. It was a huge success, so we're doing it again. Last year, we teamed up with St. Vincent de Paul and with Green Acres to provide. We asked community members to come in, provide non-perishable foods, soups, whatnot, and donations, and they'd get a small gift of a succulent, and they'd get an information card. We were able to collect about 7,000 pounds of food last year, which broke records for the most that St. Vincent de Paul ever collected in one event. So thought, why not do it again? It kicked off November 14th this year. We've already collected 3,000 pounds of food. Runs through December 18th. And so we're hoping to break that 7,000 pounds of food this year. And you can donate that at the UEC Tuesday through Saturday from 12 to 4. So we collect food, donations, whatnot. So pretty cool program that we're putting on there, and with the help of Green Acres and St. Vincent de Paul. And then the kind of last update, and I always like to throw in, our water system. It's a federally run system, and Folsom Reservoir is the one right here by us. It's for flood control, purposes, but that's where our primary water source comes from. It's at about 340,000 acre feet, which is about 35% capacity. Sounds low, but they operate it for flood control. As I mentioned, we're expecting some rains, so it's actually at about 87% of its historical average. It's in good shape. The one that we like to look at is Shasta. It's about 4.5 times bigger than Folsom, and that one's at 111% historical average. So it's looking really good. So. Yeah, a few years back we had a drought, but we're looking at pretty good shape right now. And just kind of touching on that similar topic, precipitation this year, October, and one of the stations we look at it in the Sierras averages about 2.8 inches of rain in October. We only got 0.7, so we're thinking, hey, maybe it's a little dry. Then in November they usually see 5.3 inches, and we saw 13.4, so more than double. So, again, we're looking like we're in pretty good shape there. So, yeah, and those are really the updates for you as a whole. So, any questions?
Any commissioners have questions? So anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission at this time? Okay, all right, thanks, Jason.
Yeah.
Don't go away. So item 6.2, Environmental Utilities Capital Improvement Projects Overview. For this item, Jason will again provide an overview of completed, ongoing, and future environmental utilities capital improvement projects for information.
Well, yeah. So about a year ago, November last year, we gave a capital improvement project update, and so just wanted to touch on some of the projects that we've completed since then, and then also talk about some of the ongoing projects or some of the new projects that we're looking at, and you can find them here. So the first one that I want to touch on, and it is the ASR well project. It's many projects, so it's kind of an interesting one, but we did complete construction on 2 new wells at Campus Oaks and Misty Wood locations. Those were drilled and notice of completion in March this year. And then we're now in the process of designing the top side, the pump station, the chemical room, the electrical room for those wells, and those are about 90%. So we're going into construction with those next year, early next year. And so on the screen here, Misty Wood well site is on Pleasant Grove, just west of Foothills. That road's right now being widened by Public Works, so it'll be 3 lanes going in the westbound direction. So we have a kind of an in and out approach to that one. Try to keep it as safe as possible, because I live in Roseville as well, and people fly on this street and then on this stretch. So. We have that in and out approach. It's also kind of a nice little open space area, so we're trying to reach out to the public for landscaping and possible sound walls, trying to keep the impact on the residents. That's LaPorte Street right there to a minimum. And then over at Campus Oaks, that site is off of Painted Desert, and the best way I can describe that is it's a little south of the Nugget that's on Blue Oaks. A Nugget and the 24-hour fitness and that shopping center, and a lot further from neighbors. The closest one is the assisted living care there, but it's a much smaller site, and it's going to be surrounded by commercial eventually, and that project has less concerns of in and out, but more concerns on smaller sites and whatnot, and that both of these projects are looking to begin construction in spring of next year. So the next project on the list, and we've been talking about the Utility Exploration Center. Really excited about this one. I have 3 kids, so they enjoy this project the most, I think. We ribbon cut this project in April 6th of this year, and this one includes new exhibits like the cab of a garbage truck, which I can say is a fan favorite. Meet the Microbes is kind of a touch exhibit where you learn about what's in wastewater. It's got an interactive stormwater exhibit, and then we're partnering with our friends here in Electric, and they have a Powering Roseville exhibit as well. So yeah, excited. And there's kind of in the design, here's what we thought it should look like, and then there in actuality, just, I mean, real cool, right? And pretty much exactly like the rendering, so. So yeah, very excited about that. We're seeing, and you'll get an update from the Utility Exploration Center, but we're seeing record numbers of people coming in and visiting the site, so it's awesome. Yeah, and the next project, I mean, we're doing some new projects, but we're also rehabbing some of our existing projects. And so the cured in place pipe rehabilitation, it's rehabbing sewer pipe. And it's minimally invasive. You either enter at a manhole or a small pit, and instead of digging up the entire street, you're able to put a liner in the pipe and use a UV light train to kind of to have it expand and attach to the sewer pipe. We're currently finalizing 17,000 feet of lining this year, and since 2018, we've lined up about 35,000 feet of pipe, and that's really all there is to it. There's a big truck, and then there's a van that has the equipment in it. So it's as minimally invasive as possible. Another one that we probably have heard us talk about before, but the Water Operations Crew Facility. This one we're growing out in the west side of town. This one's out in the same location as the west side tanks, and across the street from Pleasant Grove, or right next door to the Pleasant Grove wastewater treatment plant. And it provides a remote operations center, so that not everyone is attached to the corp yard and miles away from everything. And so this is where a lot of the growth we're seeing in the west side. And it's half office space, half like shop and welding and equipment center like that. It's about 6,000 square feet, and it got completed in July this year. So I know the distribution staff it helps them quite a bit. So excited about that one. And then I think there's one more, or nope, that's all for the completed projects, but some ongoing projects, and the first one on the list, Utility Operations Center. It's an ongoing theme, but we're growing in the city and outgrowing some of our facilities, and so this Utility Operations Center is meant as a solid waste and water utility facility, and it'll include all sorts of things like vehicle maintenance, but vehicle charging for all the electric vehicles that were required by legislation to purchase, and it's currently in the planning stages, and it'll come to City Council in 2025 for CEQA consideration. The Reclaim Basin project probably doesn't mean too much, but the 4 basins on the west side of the plant there, 2 were built in 1969 and 2 were built in 2003. The ones built in 1969, we're starting to see subsurface damage. You see some cracks here. It's hard to see in the pictures, but there's some swelling under there, so much needed rehab for those. And there's also a couple design flaws that we fixed in 2003 that we want to bring to the new basins as well. And so those are likely to be done in the wintertime when flows are low at the water treatment plant. So we're expecting fall of next year to begin construction. So our favorite 5-foot sewer pipeline here, the 63 and 66-inch interceptor that we call Bubba. It's our main trunk into our Dry Creek wastewater treatment plant. And we've done a couple condition assessments in 2014 and 2019 and some more in 2023, and we've really narrowed down some spots in this pipeline that need rehabilitation. Problem, as you'd expect, is moving that much sewer. We'd have to bypass to get in there, and that's the most difficult part of this project, is moving that much sewer, 5 feet worth of sewer, around the location we're working in. And this is an example of a person working in the pipe and hooked up, and it's, as expected, a pretty nasty environment. So We're pending a design approach with some more, we're doing some metering, flow metering right now. And we're hoping to either have an approach for construction this summer, so. The West Zone recycle water tank, so we provide recycled water to the city year-round. The Energy Park uses recycled water for cooling towers and whatnot, so these tanks have been in need. We did an assessment, needed some structural upgrades and some coating upgrades. We're seeing some corrosion. And so we have to take these two tanks down, but since we have year-round demand, we've got to take them down separately. So they can't both come down at once. And also, we've kind of have to do that again in the winter months when irrigation at parks and irrigation at landscape corridors are off, basically. So we began construction in October, and we're in the middle of it. That's the scaffolding. It's very cool going in one of these tanks that always have water in it. So we've gotten to go in there and take a look, and they're working on the first tank now, with both tanks being complete by March. And last project is a group of 3 projects, but at our wastewater treatment plant, again with the theme of growing, we have 3 new buildings. So 2 at Dry Creek. First is a collections building expansion. As we get more and more sewer collection system and more pump stations, lift stations, we need expanding need for staff and equipment and vehicles and whatnot. So that expansion will help us meet those needs. The other building at Dry Creek is an operations and lab building. So the lab's been there for a while. It's got outdated equipment, and there's actually new regulations, shocker here in California. And so in order to meet these, we need to have an updated lab and an expanded operations building. And then over at Pleasant Grove, right now the maintenance crew is working out of, portables basically, and they need something similar to Dry Creek, a permanent building that has a welding shop, a fabrication shop, include place for staff and equipment. So that was not included in the expansion that we just completed, so we added it here as a separate project, but much needed. So, and here's just the schedule, the collections building in fall of next year, and the operations and lab building is a little ahead of that in summer, and then the maintenance building is looking more like winter of 2025. And so just kind of a quick summary, robust CIP program, a lot of impactful projects in here. We have well over 50 projects, big and small. We're working on water distribution, water treatment, wastewater treatment collections, and then waste services has some projects as well. And we've completed nearly, notice of completion on nearly $22 million worth of projects since last year. So, yeah. That's all for the update. Any questions?
Any commissioners?
I got a couple of questions. What is an interceptor?
Yeah, it's just a term for basically a larger wastewater treatment plant. A collector, I said a trunk line or an interceptor, it collects a lot of, minor lines into it.
Okay, so it's just a very large sewer.
Yeah, and this one, you could almost walk in without ducking, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Why do we need cured-in-place sewer rehabilitation?
Well, one of the benefits of it is if we didn't, we could always dig. Usually sewers are a little deeper, water's higher, and then sewer comes down below it. So we'd have to dig up an entire stretch of street, hundreds of feet. So to get around that, we dig a small pit here and a small pit over there, and then we're able to line the entire pipe without destroying a whole street and impacting residents and businesses.
So why are we lining the pipe?
From that point,
Let's get really
sure.
basic.
It could be a variety of reasons. They tend to be older in the older parts of town.
Yeah.
And we're currently doing one in like Church Street and Atkinson over here. And
So it's to keep them from leaking.
yeah, so they end up getting sags in them. They end up leaking. Then a variety of different, and the pipes could be up to built in the 1950s and 60s, and so they're past their useful life as. Yeah. So.
I have a couple. So general question about funding. A lot of what you described is maintenance, and I would expect that that's in rates, but a lot of it, the buildings, et cetera, that's for expansion.
Yeah.
That's funded by connection charges?
Yeah, and it gets complicated for wastewater since we're a regional system. Connection fees, but also regional connection fees. So we have partners in SP Mud and at Placer County where some of these charges we're expanding our plants that they feed into. So it's a regional wastewater fund, not just a local connection fees.
So the pipe that you're lining, I was just curious what kind of pipe it is. Is it clay?
Yeah. Oh, well. I mean, we're a heavy proponent of clay. Some of them are like reinforced concrete pipe as well.
So we still use clay for the new stuff?
We still on smaller things our standards clay pipe from. I mean, we have a Gladding is right here in Lincoln, so.
Right. It's clay pipe tends to crack, right? So with our new, and I realize they're not completely done. The wells are done, but the top's not done.
Yep.
But what will be our total pumping capacity, groundwater pumping capacity?
Yeah. Oh, I don't know on the full range of wells, but I know on these wells specifically, and I believe it's Mistywood is looking like it'll be our highest performing well based on our testing. 2,700 GPM is the design capacity for those. Normally, we expect to get 1,800 to 2,000 GPM, which is it's low. I believe it's around the 2 point something MGD for the sake. I think the entire well field when it's done is somewhere in the range of 32 million gallons a day, but we're still kind of it's still in the planning processes.
32 total. Thank you. That's it.
Quick, I was trying to look at the map, but for the interceptor rehab, that work they're doing on Riverside along the creek, is that part of it, or is that something entirely separate?
I believe they're doing a bike trail project there. We did have a stretch in that area by Riverside, but it's been complete for about 6 or 9 months now. But we had a stretch of about 250 feet of pipe. That one was actually underneath a creek. That's another reason we can't get into those pipes without lining is a better option than going into the creek. So.
Okay, any other commissioners' questions? So anyone from the public would like to come forward and address the commission at this time? Okay, thank you for the updates, Jason.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Okay, next is item 6.3, Roseville Electric Utility Monthly Update. Report by Roseville Electric Chief Operating Officer Sean Matcham. Summarize the monthly status of Roseville Electric Utility activities for information.
Yeah, good evening, Chair Bilski and members of the commission. Sean Matcham with Roseville Electric. Few brief updates for you this evening. We have a few presentations here tonight, so I won't take too much time. But the first thing I'd like to mention as an update for the department relates to our Roseville Energy Park. Late last week, we did discover that we had a meaningful failure of our combustion turbine out at the Roseville Energy Park. This is something that, excuse me, something that we realized early in the week, and as a result, our combustion turbine and half of our power plant capacity will be unavailable for the foreseeable future for the next several months as we assess what the overall extent of the damage is and what it means to get repairs and line up the necessary crews and make the long-term repairs we need to do. Just as a reminder, our Roseville Energy Park is configured as what we call a 2-by-1 configuration. So we have 2 combustion turbines that are run off natural gas, and 1 generator, then a steam turbine that is run off steam from the production of the 2 combustion turbines. And so we lost one of the combustion turbines following some maintenance work, and our attempt to bring the unit back up failed, and we brought in Siemens as part of the overall work effort. And as part of Siemens' work and the review of all the work activities that were happening at the facility, we discovered that there was some meaningful damage to the blades, the vanes, as part of the combustion turbine there in that unit. And so right now, as I mentioned, the plant is, half the plant is unavailable. Under normal operating conditions, the facility operates at 160 megawatts. It currently is at 80 megawatts because of that 2-by-1 configuration I mentioned. So pretty important item for us, item that had been certainly not on the radar as a failure. So we're working closely with Siemens. We'll have Siemens coming on site here in mid-December, and we're going to break down that particular combustion turbine, that unit, get a good look at it, get a better understanding of the full scale of the damage, and then what the real kind of repair timeline looks like. And so big effort going on at the REP related to that. We're also working with our city risk management office, assessing the advancement of an insurance claim on this, and then we're also obviously working with a consultant to understand the root cause analysis that really led to this. At this point, it's still very early for us to make a final kind of assessment on what led to this, but a lot of work going on right now to understand what happened, get the unit apart, and understand the different paths forward in terms of repairs and what the extent of the repairs look like. It will be several $1 million is what our expectation is, and so that's a very early estimate at this point, but in the weeks to come, we'll have a better understanding about what's in front of us on the power plant. These are obviously items that are very important to us. We'll mention that despite the loss of this capacity, we stand in a very good position in terms of our ability to serve the community. This time of year, loads are very low, and so they will be for, getting into late spring next year. So it's never a good time to lose half your main power plant, but if it's going to happen, this is the preferred time of year for us. So I just wanted to mention that very important item for us. We got a lot of focus on it now, obviously, and a lot of work to come in the months ahead, but kind of fresh update on a development at our Roseville Energy Park. The second thing I want to talk about relates to an item we've talked here a number of times about, and it relates to the our peak units, the previously DWR units that are at Roseville Energy Park. Effective November 1st, we did close on the title transfer to take ownership of those units, and that's great news. A lot of good work by the department and our staff. On the heels of that title transfer, and I think we may have mentioned this before, certainly it came up at council, we took this to council, we are exploring the opportunity to bring 2 additional units to Roseville that are in DWR's portfolio now and use them to repower our Roseville Power Plant number 2. And this is a really unique opportunity for us to build upon the relationship that we've had with DWR and an opportunity for us to modernize the older power plant that we use that's been built in the early mid-1980s. And so we are working hard on that. One of the most meaningful things that happened since we finalized the transfer with DWR in November, beginning of November, is our department, led by our engineering team, issued a request for proposals for engineering, procurement, and construction to get a bid on repowering that facility. And when I say repowering, that simply means we want to take out the old equipment and bring in and install new equipment. pretty meaningful work effort. A lot of work went in to get the technical specifications and the proposed RFP out on the street. So that is out there. We had a chance to do a walkthrough with some of the big vendors, big contractors that do work in this space last week. And so we're in the window now where the RFP is on the street. Its responses are due January 21st. And so we'll wait and see what we get in terms of what bids look like and what qualified vendors look like in terms of the response to that solicitation. In the meantime, we're also working with DWR to reach agreement on terms and conditions on how the development cost can be shared between us and DWR to advance this project. And so a number of things going on in parallel, including us assessing all the necessary licenses and permits that need to go along with such a repowering of this facility. So many lanes of work going on in parallel. Our plan at this point is we're hopeful that we can bring an entire package to our city council in the March timeframe, end of Q1 next year, that will hopefully bring all this together, the award of a contractor to do the decommissioning, the installation, an agreement with DWR that will lay out the path and operation of the facility and the cost sharing for the facility going forward, as well as all the necessary completion and authorizations associated with the environmental work. So I just wanted to mention that this is another opportunity for us to work closely with DWR. A lot of work going into this. We think this is a very, again, a unique opportunity to make the assets that we own, particularly the gas fleet, to make it better, make it more cost effective, make it more efficient and cleaner burning. And so exciting for us as a department. We haven't gone through anything like this in a while. We've been getting a lot of assistance from our city attorney's office as always, but we're certainly excited and eager to see if we can bring this to closure and reach agreement with DWR on the path ahead related to this. We've had great success in reaching agreement with DWR on other arrangements, certainly with bringing our peak units to Roseville in the first place, negotiating 2 subsequent agreements that allowed us to take ownership of facilities at the REP. And so we've got a partner here, I think, that is solutions-oriented, and so are we. So we're excited about what we can do ahead on Roseville Power Plant number 2. Very, very good opportunity for us to make our resource portfolio better as we look at serving this community going forward. So brief update on that. Certainly more to come on that. You'll hear from us in the months to come. Last thing I'll mention is really a reminder, and it relates to our electric rates. Recall earlier this year, we got approved, this commission recommended, and our city council approved a series of rate increases for all customer classes. The first phase of that went into place back in June. And just a reminder to the commission and to our customers, there will be the second phase of that rate adjustment will go into effect on January 1. That's the second 9%. If you recall, there were 2 9% adjustments. That will go in effect in January. Important for us in terms of maintaining our financial health and the strength of the organization going forward. So just a reminder that that will take effect here in the new year. So with that, I'll stop as a general high-level department update. I know we've got a few presentations on the agenda here, but I'll stop there as my kind of update to the commission, and glad to answer any questions on these items or anything else you have regarding utility.
So just following your line of curiosity, what are the things that would cause a gas turbine to fail?
Yeah, so it's very early to make a final determination yet, but we were in the process of replacing a variable frequency drive at the unit or at the facility. And I'll mention that because recall last October we did have a fire with one of the variable frequency drives. We call them VFDs. Think of these as a locker room of electronics that control a motor to start up the turbine, basically. And so last October we did have a fire. We were able to replace that VFD earlier this year. And so we were taking an outage to this one to replace the other one. Basically, we bought 2 new ones. And so when we were bringing the unit back online, we were having trouble keeping the unit back online. So we contacted Siemens to take a look at it, and they took control of the unit and things like that, and to manage, watch the telemetry, put their logic in, and help run the turbine. And so it was shortly after that, when we were bringing up the turbine, that we had to shut it down. And so it's not certain yet. We don't have the final root cause analysis back, but we believe the combination of fuel, oxygen, and how that was managed when the turbine was being brought up led to a pretty hot ignition, if you will, within the combustion area of the turbine. And so as part of that effort, we were looking at how the series of basically fuel injectors, the valves for the turbine, were operating. And so we believe something happened in that space of the turbine that related to the controls of the fuel, the oxygen, and things like that. And so the turbine was damaged following that exercise. What specifically led to what specifically caused that, we're still trying to figure it out.
I got a question. So you're talking about Power Plant 2, and you're talking about a part of a power plant that has failed. Are they the same place?
No, not
Help me understand what all the different bits.
Sure. So the failure occurred at one of the turbines at Roseville Energy Park. So there are 5 turbines out at the Roseville Energy Park. One of the turbines failed. This is the failure that we're talking about. Roseville Power Plant number 2 is a separate facility in Placer, just outside the Roseville city limits in Placer County. It is a older combustion turbine facility that has 2 gas turbines that were built in the 1980s. We're looking at replacing that, really upgrading that facility nearly in its entirety with new units. And that's the opportunity with DWR.
Okay.
That answered my question.
Sorry if I wasn't clear on that, yeah.
No,
It sounded like you were going to buy turbines from DWR and replace the turbine that you're going to fix that broke. But no.
No,
they're
yeah.
Different
Two
locations.
completely different.
I apologize if I wasn't clear on, completely two different facilities.
And,
Yeah.
and the DWR turbines, they're at the Roseville Energy Park also, right?
Not the ones that we would look at repowering.
No, the ones that you just
Yeah.
took ownership.
Yeah.
So you really have 4 turbines at that location.
Five,
Oh.
yeah. Two turbines that we acquired from DWR, 2 combustion turbines from the original, in our REP, and a steam turbine at REP.
Oh, and then the steam turbine, yeah.
5 at REP, 2 at RPP2. We're looking at completely overhauling RPP2, and we have hopefully a plan to fix the 1 turbine that just failed this week at our Roseville Energy Park.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sounds like a controls failure, controls problem. May have led to this disaster.
Yeah, it certainly could be looked at from that perspective. We have our own thoughts on it yet, but it's a little early for us to be a little too specific on it yet. But certainly we have our thoughts on how this emerged, and so we'll work through it here in the months to come. Yeah.
So I have another question.
Sure.
So several $1 million, how is that likely to affect rates?
So there won't be effect on rates for an item like that. We do have maintained some reserves, and we'll make room in our capital budget to prioritize this type of expenditure. So we wouldn't adjust rates for, let's say it's a $3 or $4 million expenditure on this. We'll lean on our existing reserves, which we have, and then also as we look ahead, we may reprioritize some capital work and other expenses as we look to move this to the front of the line.
Can I still put up all my Christmas lights?
I encourage you to put up all your Christmas lights. Yeah. Yeah. So just as put it into context, so we have our portfolio consists now of nearly 440 460 megawatts of generating capacity. Even with this half the unit down, we're seeing loads at the 140, 150 megawatt range here across winter. So we're plenty strong and plenty deep in terms of serving the community. We're just making sure that, again, not great to happen, but if it's going to happen this time of year is really the right time for it to happen. And so our focus is getting, understanding the path forward in terms of what the scope of the repairs and timing of the repairs are, getting the parts, getting the staff to get Siemens to converge on Roseville to make the necessary repairs, and all geared towards having everything back up by the time we get into June, right? And I'm not saying it's going to be that long, but that's really what we look at here. Certainly, we'll see good hydro production, hydro capacity, bringing us certainly into June. And it really, as we turn our attention to July, August, September, that's really when we need the whole fleet available. And so we're not concerned at this point based on what we've seen. Mm-hmm. An important item for us in terms of the failure of the equipment at REP.
At some point, you're beyond the repair, and it's replace time. Is it going to get? I mean, is it concealed? They come in, they look at it and said, you know what, it's time just to replace.
Yeah,
That'd be a big bill.
Yeah, exactly. So I think when we're going to have Siemens here, I mentioned the second week of December, we're going to open up the case, open up the unit, and get a good look at it. So there's really two options for us right now, as I understand it, and we've met with Siemens on Friday. We'll open up the unit, and we'll take a look at it. And one path is we'll replace the damaged parts. We'll get the parts, and we'll replace them on site, right? So that's one option. And that's how we would do that. We would just ship the parts in, we'll have them install, and it doesn't look as comprehensive and of a meaningful repair. Alternatively, we take a look in the second week here of December, and we see there's more significant and meaningful damage in this section of the turbine. And the turbine is in sections, right? It's not just, it's just necessarily replace everything. Depending on what we see, we may then, instead of trying just to replace the parts, we may replace the entire module, the combustion module for where this section is. And so that's really the two paths that are in front of us. So your question of do you replace it all? You don't replace it all, but we'll replace parts or we'll replace more of the module for this part. And so that's what we're looking at. We're getting estimates for both kind of scenarios, but we don't know enough yet to inform which direction it is. But I think the more significant scenario is we replace the module. It gets produced by Siemens, manufactured, and they send us a new module, and then it's a little more of a swap in, swap out type thing. So we'll know more here in a couple weeks, and then the good news is what we've heard so far is at least Siemens availability, resourcing to bring folks here at the beginning of the year is pretty open. So we would try to jump on this as early as we can in the new year, obviously contingent on parts and timing and availability and things like that getting in here.
So I have two questions. Does the city have insurance to help cover any of these costs?
Absolutely, we do. Particularly for the power plant, we have a separate insurance program for these sort of events that cover specifically our power plant operations and things of that, business loss, things like that. So we have been, I think I mentioned, we're working with our risk management team here at the city. Alliant is our broker, and so they will be on site here in a couple weeks when we crack open the case and get a firsthand look at the equipment. Our insurance broker will be there to look at that. And so we will assess whether an insurance claim is the right path here on this. I expect it will be, but we want to understand the nature of the cost, because there are deductibles, like any insurance program, we got deductibles we pay, and we do the math on whether it makes sense or not. I expect that this certainly may involve insurance claim initially, but I think there's probably some other things we'll look at long-term as well in terms of as we look at the root cause analysis. But short answer is, yeah, we have insurance for these things. We just renewed our insurance program probably a couple months ago, and so we've carried all these necessary coverages for these sort of events as well as business interruption. It just then whether it makes sense to pull the trigger on it or not.
Well, this was blade damage, right?
Yes,
It's
blade-
not related to lubrication at all?
Blade damage. Yeah.
You had also mentioned that when Siemens took control over it is when this happened.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that they're liable?
It could be. It's too early to tell. Yeah, it's too early to tell. There was a lot going on at the plant during the period of time. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. So anyone from the public would like to come forward and address the commission on this issue? Okay, all right. Okay, thank you for the update, Sean. Item 6.4 is Roseville Electric Utility Capital Improvement Projects Overview Presentation by Assistant Electric Utility Director Chris Porter and Acting Assistant Electric Utility Director Joanna Cucci, providing an overview of Roseville Electric's capital improvement projects for information.
Good evening. We're here to present on Roseville Electric's capital improvement program. It's a little less detailed than EU's, but we hope we give a good overview of what we're doing this year. So this is basically how the program categories that we break our CIPs out into. So the first thing is new customers. This is new customer connections to the system and how much we expect to spend on connecting new customers to our system. The next, and we expect $6.7 million in that category of capital improvement this year, and maybe a little higher by the end of the year than that. We expect to spend $11.4 million on distribution, investment, and improvement, $6.4 million on improvements to the power plants. That does not include a lot of what Sean talked about just a few minutes ago. So that is what we looked at the beginning of the year. There may be some changes to that number as we move forward. And finally, we expect to spend $5.8 million, or we budgeted $5.8 million in facilities and customer engagement projects. So this is our buildings and facilities, and then our investment into our software systems that support our customer and business systems. So for a total of new money allocated in the FY25 budget of $30.3 million. But we do also have carry forward money. So some of the project costs are actually a little higher than this from carry forward money from previous years. Moving on to where we fund these programs from, about $19.5 million of our costs are funded from customer rates. $8.2 million are developer fees. That is a mix of new customer connection fees called contribution in aid of construction. And then $1.5 million is the backbone fee collection, which is to fund development of our backbone. We brought that to you guys, I think, last month for approval and update. And then some of these projects are additionally funded by other city departments where we've shared costs either between EU and electric or a general fund department and electric. And that's $2.6 million are coming from other funds. So that's, again, $30.3 million of funding sources for our projects.
Good evening, Commissioners. So talk a little bit about some of the projects we have. As Joanna mentioned, we have one of our main focuses is connecting new customers. I think it was $6.7 million we have budgeted this year. The expectation is that's all completely funded by development as development pays its own way. Some of the notable items that we're doing this year on that front, if you're unaware, the Westbrook Boulevard has finally been complete by the city, in fact, in lieu of JMC completing it. But they did complete the section of Westbrook Boulevard in front of our Sierra Vista substation, which came online in April of 2021. This is important to us because all the underground conduits which we use to bring the circuits out of the substation are built with the road, and the road hasn't been there, so we haven't had the conduits we need to really gain access to that substation. We've had some temporary connections to it just to use it for the last 3 years, but now we'll be able to fully use that. So with the completion of the road, we will be getting in there and pulling the cable to get all the circuits out of the substation. It's going to be important for serving a lot of the major commercial projects you may see that are starting along Baseline, including the Costco shopping center and other large projects in that area. Additionally, we completed some upgrades, or we're in the final processes of completing upgrades at the Galleria Mall. This is for an EV charging bus depot that's going to be, I think they're looking at bringing it online in March timeframe. So we did a lot of upgrades to make sure that those buses can charge there. And then additionally, on the residential front, we expect, on average this year, we're going to probably complete about another 1,200 residential lots. So we're providing service to about 1,200 lots this year. Next. So on our distribution system, this is going to include all the projects related to our substations and our 12 kV distribution system. Major projects this year is we started this project a year and a half ago, I believe. It's the Kirby Substation 12 kV switchgear replacement. This is at the substation. The switchgear was installed with the substation in about 1979. It's reached end of life, and so we're going to be replacing that. You can see a picture on the left there that shows the foundation getting framed for the switchgear pad. As you know, we have the opportunity, we're going to be expanding that switchgear to make it a little bit larger to give us some more flexibility on the circuits we have coming out of there. This is important to us too, because, like I said, it's reaching end of life, and this substation is responsible for serving about 2,800 customers. So it's important to those customers that this, equipment's replaced before it fails. Creekview Substation will be starting in early design phases this year. The substation is going to be located on the intersection of Westbrook Boulevard and Benchmark Drive / Holt Parkway. They kind of change names as they cross Westbrook Boulevard on the north side there. This anticipated not to begin construction until, I believe, spring of 27 in anticipation. So the first thing we have to do is we have to order a transformer, which we plan on ordering at the beginning of the new year. Currently, time for a substation transformer is a little over 3 years. So all the projects going to be lined up for the delivery of that transformer. Also, Sierra Vista Substation, which I just talked about, when we initially constructed it, we only installed one of the 2 transformers for the substation because it wasn't needed at the time. It helps to have some little bit of diversity in the age of the units for reliability. But as the load begins to grow on the west side of town, we will be installing the second transformer and completing the full build out of that substation. And Roseville Parkway Overpass is nearing completion. As part of that project, we have undergrounded all the 12 kV and 60 kV overhead lines that used to cross that area. And so now when it's complete, when you drive up the overpass, there will be no overhead lines there as we've undergrounded all those lines. I have a number of projects on the generation front. One of the bigger ones is we'll be replacing the belt press at the Roseville Energy Park it's called the ZLD, or the Zero Liquid Discharge System. This belt press is basically when the wastewater comes out of the plant. It's a slurry. This belt press is what's responsible for compressing, getting the water out of that slurry and creating like a salt cake that gets hauled off site. The belt press we have is near end of life. It's not very reliable. We will be installing a new centrifuge type technology with the ability for it to be redundant. If this part of the process breaks down, all this waste slurry has to get hauled off site, and it gets very expensive to haul this off site. And we talked about the ARPEAK units that we just took ownership of from the state. Part of that effort to get title to those units was applying for and getting accepted into the CEC's DEBA program, Distributed Energy Backup Assets Program. So in order to do that program, we applied for the application for the installation of evaporative coolers and gas compressors for the ARPEAK units. Those will allow efficiency upgrades to allow the units to run closer to nameplate during the peak times in the summer. So the evaporative coolers cool the incoming air. Cooler air has higher density, you can get more output. And then the gas pressure at REP as it comes into the facility from PG&E is in the 400 PSI range. You need a little over 400 PSI. For the ARPEAK units to run at max capacity, they need to be at 495 PSI. So these gas compressors will allow the units to run at as close to the nameplate as we can get. Also, we have a sample panel that we're replacing. That sample panel is for the online monitoring of all the water that's used in the steam processes REP. Very critical to make sure we maintain very specific chemistry on that water and it's very clean, as any kind of contaminants or any kind of pH that's off will cause damage to the facility. And along the lines that Sean was talking earlier with the potential project with DWR for repowering our Roseville Power Plant number 2. As he mentioned, we have an RFP on the street right now that's expected to close on January 21st. Ideally, if we move forward with this, we'll be awarding a contract probably early March, which will kick off very significant activities at the Roseville Power Plant number 2, which will basically we'll be rebuilding it from ground up, including the 60 kV switchyard that it connects to our system at.
Okay, and then to wrap up our project discussion is the facilities and customer engagement. On the facilities side, we are wrapping up our construction at 116 South Grant Street. In FY25, there's a budget of $2.3 million, but the entire Phase 2 project is $7.8 million to finish out floors 3 and 4. 2.1 million dollars of that budget is coming from the police department, who will be occupying a portion of the 3rd floor of this building. And so we are leasing out a portion of the building to the police department. It's looking really great up on floors 3 and 4. We are getting close. We expect to complete construction by the end of the year, with move-in dates looking like the middle of January right now. I mean, hoping for a miracle and we can move in sooner, but that's the news that we are currently getting on the building. Beyond that, we do have some money in our budget to begin exploring some investment at the Roseville Energy Park. On the building side, on the offices, we are out of space for staff at the Roseville Energy Park. In addition, we have a dangerous area that we need to repair. So we have about $500,000 that we're looking at the REP office space that needs additional investment. And then on the customer engagement side, that's really looking at our customer information system and its add-ons. We're looking at a customer portal that will allow our customers to access the AMI data as it comes in, since we invested in the AMI system. Currently, there's no external view at interval data for our customers, so really looking at how we create a customer portal so that people can see their data and make usage decisions both on the water and electric side. So that investment is funded by both EU and Roseville Electric. And I think that wraps up our presentation, but we'll be happy to answer any questions.
If I may add one thing to the building, I think it was during the last month's meeting, I briefed the commission that we would be moving in on November 21st. And that date had held for so long during the year. And I think it was the next day we got an update that said it was going to be pushed out to the end of the year. So anyway, a little disappointing. We would be otherwise ready to move in now. So.
Something to look forward to. Go ahead.
I do have a question on, going back to the available funding sources. I see the second one down is developer fees.
Yes.
And the city can only build so much. So what's going to happen once the development fees are gone?
So those are nexus fees, so they're set at exactly the cost to serve. And so there's no like profit made from those fees. It's just exactly the cost that we need to, the cost we incur putting in, we charge the developer. So the utility's whole whether those fees come in or not, because they're offset by expenses. So it's an equal balance between expense and revenue.
Okay.
So that piqued my curiosity. Is there a build-out, a projection for a build-out for the city of Roseville?
Yes, I think.
I mean, yeah, so barring any future annexation, I think we expect to probably finish installing the majority of the infrastructure probably in the next 4 to 5 years. If it keeps on the same pace as that.
Anybody else?
Will be built out in 5 years.
The developers may still be building houses and stuff, but generally speaking, if once we return to our normal operations of installing transformers, we will install an entire subdivision when the first house comes in. So there'll be probably houses and empty lots still that haven't been built out, but our end will be done in the 4 to 5 years based on what we've
All
seen.
the roads will be in.
Hopefully. But yeah, because in order to build the houses along the road, that developer has to build that road, right? So that's kind of why these, on the west side of town, there's sections that you have to drive around.
Yeah.
I do have a question. How are the incoming transformers with the proposed tariffs? How is that going to affect our your budget?
We don't expect that to affect anything. We have a current contract with set pricing in it. I mean, I guess technically if they started having to pay more, they could try to pass those costs along. But at this point, we don't have enough information to think that that's going to materially affect that. And to Joanna's point too earlier with your question on the funding source there, if it's for new construction and the cost of new construction pays its own way, if the transformer cost goes up, it doesn't affect us per se because we're not paying for those new transformers. So it won't be happy. Developers won't be happy, but
no impact on rates.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Okay, all right. Well, thank you both. Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is item 6.5, Roseville Electric RPS Cost Containment. Presentation by Power Supply and Portfolio Administrator Petra Wallace with an update of the RPS procurement plan and the RPS enforcement program to address market volatility and ensure compliance with California's Renewables Portfolio Standard, or RPS, mandates. This is for information. Good evening.
Good evening. I hope everybody got excited with that title and description. But again, today I would like to do a presentation on the RPS regulation and how it affects Roseville Electric. So just a little bit of background. The California RPS requirement, or the Renewable Portfolio Standard, was established back in 2002 under Senate Bill 1078. And basically, it has been updated ever since then, and the latest version requires all utilities to have 60% of their energy coming from renewable sources by 2030. Eligible resources, renewable resources include solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, and small hydroelectric generation, so no large hydro, it qualifies as renewable energy source. And then there's a compliance that the requirement or the bill provides annual targets, but we have compliance periods, which usually like 3 to 5 year periods when we need to meet the percentages or the overall percentages, but they provide you annual goals. But if you don't meet 1 year's goal, you can meet it up at the next year. So again, it's a 3-year compliance period usually that we look at. And then if you don't comply with the regulatory requirement, it can result in penalties, including fees and possible other penalties. But there has not been too many occasions where people did not meet with regulatory compliance. Also, just to put in perspective, CEC, or the California Energy Commission, it's slightly behind on verifying compliance periods. So about a month ago or so, we just got the clearance that we did meet compliance period that ended in 2020. So they are lagging a little bit behind, so we shall see how it goes and how the verifications move forward. So on the next slide, we can talk about that Roseville so far has met with all renewable energy requirements. Oh, wait, sorry, I was on the wrong one. Yes, so So the California Energy Commission oversees different aspects of the Renewable Portfolio Standard Program. So there is a procurement plan that describes how utilities will achieve the renewable energy procurement targets. And then there's also an enforcement plan that outlines how utilities will meet its RPS obligations and what actions will be taken to enforce compliance. So Roseville has implemented and updated these plans as necessary since 2013. So that's when it was initially taken for council approval. It was updated back in 2018. And again, I believe in 2022, but it was really approved by council late last year. So we are planning to take these two policies to council again, or two plans to update and make some amendments to the existing ones. So just to give a little bit background on how Roseville is doing. So The last major RPS procurement or transactions were back in 2013, 2014, when the city entered into several long-term contracts, which would mean 10-plus years contracts, because that's one of the requirements of the RPS regulation, that you need to have some long-term contracts in place. Since then, we issued an RFP for renewable procurement back at the end of 2022 with no responses. We tried a different route, and then we issued a request for offers in December of 2023, where we got some limited responses. One of the responses was from Shell Energy, where we entered into a renewable contract a couple of months ago. But again, that contract we entered in earlier this year, but it will start in 2028. We are also working on and negotiating for a local project, and then trying to get some other transactions in the books too, as the percentage requirements for renewable resources are keep increasing. And again, the local generation or the local renewable project would start again around 2028. On the next slide, we can see that Roseville has met all renewable energy requirements through compliance period 4 or through 2024. And then we wanted to point out some of the market challenges that we are seeing for compliance period 5. As I mentioned, in this last request for offers, we only received proposals or offers that would start in 2028, which would be after compliance period 5. There's also, we reached out to current counterparties to see if they are willing to extend our current contracts for a couple of years to provide renewable energy, but they showed no interest in renewing our current contracts. And then the main thing that drives all this is the California independent system operators interconnection backlog. So whenever you are building a new renewable generation, you need transmission to connect into the system, right? And there is a huge backlog that the California ISO is evaluating. Therefore, most of the projects are delayed because there's a backlog of all the development that they are putting in requests to connect in certain areas of the transmission line. And then Chris could get into details, all the engineering behind it, that how much each transmission line can take and where it would work. But that's one of the main issues why there are no projects available to get for the next compliance period. So when we go to the next slide, we can see that in the RPS regulation, there's a section that allows for optional compliance measures. So that what it means that it allows utilities to exercise these measures to assist with adhering to the RPS regulations, which includes, so these different measures would include either cost limitation for expenditures or delay of timely compliance, excess procurement, and portfolio balance requirement reduction. So these are the different options that we evaluated. What we are focusing on right now is the cost limitation for expenditures. So Roseville is currently updating and taking to City Council in mid-December the new procurement and enforcement plan for RPS, where we are updating the calculations and the expenditures to ensure compliance with the requirements while minimizing financial impact to the customers. Currently, we are assessing a specific of the cost limitation provisions, so we are in the final stages, and then planning to implement it again before the end of the year, before the next compliance period. Any questions?
Wow. Go ahead.
Let's just start with that last part. I didn't understand that at all. You're updating the cost limitation provision.
Yes.
So
So
We are going to be out of compliance.
we expect, I'm not ensuring you that we're going to try to do everything we can to stay in compliance, but there's a good chance that we are not going to meet with all the regulatory requirements to meet compliance period 5 requirements.
Right.
But there are measures in the regulations that allows us to not comply with regulatory requirements if certain things happen.
Yes.
And that's what we are working on, to update those sections of our current policy or current plan.
In other words, we're trying to fit through their loopholes. They've created loopholes.
Yes.
And there are
And-
problems in the system because of the interconnection problems. I mean,
Yes.
I assume
And this-
everybody has got this problem.
Yes, and the CEC is well aware of this issue, and we had several conversations with staff members, and they are encouraging us or most utilities to update this section of the procurement plan or enforcement plan to help guide, everybody and make sure that we are not going to pay huge penalties at the end. So we have been discussions with the CEC staff.
Now I need to go back. So the enforcement plan, it's our enforcement plan. We enforce ourselves?
Yes.
Well, what if we don't?
It's a regulatory requirement to have an enforcement plan. So it basically just provides you a roadmap how to meet regulatory compliance. So if you follow that, you're doing your best. So basically, it's a proof that you are trying to meet regulatory requirements. So you're doing certain steps to meet the regulatory requirements.
So it isn't like we financially penalize ourselves if we don't meet it isn't, it's
No,
just.
we are not penalizing ourselves financially,
Good.
yes.
If I may just clear, so Petra mentioned the California Energy Commission and how they were delayed in their verification of compliance. So the California Energy Commission ultimately has the enforcement and the teeth here to penalize and potentially fine utilities that don't meet their regulatory requirements. And I think really what we're saying here is we're looking ahead for the next compliance period, which begins next year and extends 3 years. What we're seeing based on our procurement efforts and our solicitations to buy renewable energy is that there are no real meaningful long-term projects coming to market that we're able to purchase in the near term that will provide a benefit. And so it is, I think, Commissioner, part of not meeting, we're looking at it from a couple ways. One is we may be shallow or deficient in meeting the RPS requirements for the next compliance period, but there's also of the cost implication, right? And so if we're going to, our goal is if we're buying renewable resources, we're investing in long-term contracts for resources that will benefit us for a long time and meet that, what Petra referred to as that long-term requirement. There's a compliance benefit for that. What we're seeing in the market now is those types of resources and contracts are not showing up. They're not being delivered to market for a number of reasons. A backlog in the ISOQ is one. Supply chain has been another. And I think the cost of capital has also put a damper on developers being able to bring projects and capital to market. So what we're looking at is really, there's a cost implication here as well. We can go out and buy what they call in our market short-term renewable energy credits. And that's simply nothing more than a piece of paper that says you've met a regulatory requirement. It provides no energy, provides no capacity, provides no load-serving capability for us as an organization. And so we're looking at this in the context of everything else that's happening here with us as an organization. We've raised rates cumulatively just shy of 30% over the last 26 months. We don't think it's in the best interest of Roseville customers, our businesses and residents, to buy a paper certificate that is being purchased in a broken market under scarcity pricing and passing it on to our customers. It provides us with no long-term benefit. Right. There's a high premium to that. This mechanism, the cost containment mechanism Petra explained, is really a regulatory tool as a relief valve to protect customers from high prices, high costs that would affect their rates. Its purpose is to provide a relief valve against renewable procurement, exactly what we have to do more of over the next 3 years. So we're looking at this kind of a big picture perspective. We think we're going to be fine for 2025, meeting compliance obligations, just if you look at that year. 26 to 27, based on what we're seeing in the market and a desire not to pass through premium pricing and scarce pricing to our customers, we want to exercise this relief valve, which is not something we're creating. It's actually a mechanism in the regulatory regime for these standards. The CEC's put this in place for folks. So we're looking at the cost of paper compliance versus and passing that on to our customers, or using this mechanism for a short-term window. Now, one of the things, Petra, we were going to mention here is we see this deficiency largely short-term for 2 years. And so with the projects that we have coming down the pike, some of the agreements that Petra just mentioned coming on in 2028, we think we look very good beyond this next 3 years, this next compliance period. So we're really asking ourselves the question of whether it's appropriate to buy short-term paper compliance that provides no benefit at a real high price and passing it on to customers on the heels of what have been meaningful cost increases, rate increases over the last couple of years. We don't think that makes sense. And so this gives us the option. We're updating our document to provide us with that option, basically to not pass on this. And that will come under scrutiny from the California Energy Commission. They ultimately have the regulatory oversight, the penalty, the teeth to pass on any penalties or fines. But if this mechanism is structured right, and we'll have it structured right based on the regulations, that will, in theory, that will protect us against any consequence for not meeting a short-term compliance period.
I appreciate the explanation. And I would wholeheartedly agree that wasting money and charging our customers for it is not a good idea. I'm a little surprised that you think that the thing's going to cure, because everybody is faced with the same increasing RPS requirement, and there aren't any easy projects to bring online and connect to the grid, because as you said, everything that you could easily connect to the grid is probably already connected, and now you're talking about projects that have significant transmission infrastructure that has to be built and paid for by somebody, and so these are going to be much more expensive to come on, and they're going to come on one at a time, and everybody's going to be bidding on them. It doesn't seem like a really good business environment, to have to be purchasing RPS to meet these requirements in the next few years. But you think in 2028, it'll loosen up and things will get better?
That's what we have seen from the RFPs and the RFOs that we have received. There's a lot more projects coming online in 2028. So the variety that it's available 28 on, it's much wider than what we can see currently.
I noticed that you didn't have batteries on the list of compliance.
So the batteries had a work that they count renewable if you charge them from renewable energy sources. So if you charge them from the grid, then they don't count as renewable.
Well, then they don't count it, even if it's, well, I guess there isn't as much surplus solar in the system as there used to be because of all the new batteries that have come online, so used to be. Well, how about large hydro? We've got large hydro. How does I know it doesn't count towards RPS, but doesn't it help the situation somewhat because it's not?
Yeah, so there's a difference between renewable and then you also have to be carbon-free. So large hydro qualifies in carbon-free. So that works well for that section of the regulatory requirements.
Because that did not make sense to me at all. And currently, as you know, we're ripping out small hydro facilities all over the North State, albeit many of them are very old and outdated. And I could see this being a detriment to removing those facilities. The benefit of removal, of course, is the idea of restoring salmon habitat, which is a whole nother separate issue. But that just struck me as, in left field. The other thing, just the CAISO, am I incorrect in understanding that I thought Roseville, as a public utility, don't necessarily have to comply with, when the ISO issues one of these mandates, we don't have to.
This is a California Energy Commission mandate, the RPS requirement.
Okay.
And the California ISO, it's an independent system
Right,
operator. So
right.
we are in bank, so we are not in the California ISO, but most projects are usually built within the Cal ISO territory. So that's why the issue of interconnection, and
Got it, okay.
that's the difference. So we are a different balancing authority, but most projects are in Central Valley, that it's all
Fall
the
under
California, yes.
Is the site's reservoir counted in any of this?
No.
Okay.
So it sounds like you're doing everything you can to comply with the law and not pass on costs to our customers that don't need to be passed on.
Yes, we are trying to document everything, show all of our efforts, for the future to prove that we are trying to meet with regulatory requirements within our means.
While the regulators are currently 4 years behind in their regulatory duties.
Yeah.
Good.
So to use a silly analogy, it sounds like somebody who's on a diet and they've got a 2,000 calorie a day minimum. So today I'll binge and I'll eat 1,800 calories, but then tomorrow I'll eat 200 calories of healthy food, and therefore I'm even. Is that a bad analogy, or is that kind of where we're at with it, power-wise?
It's not necessarily, you can talk, it's not necessarily power-wise, it's just to help people mitigate. So if the project comes on, let's say in 2027, that still helps us for a compliance period. So they are just trying to help because they know when a project is built, there's, let's say, 100 megawatts comes online, even though you only need 20, what are you going to do with the extra 80? So there's kind of a step and a scale to get more and more renewable requirements, but the projects don't come each year online to meet those steps. So
that's a good question. Do we need more energy? Do we need to procure energy in order to meet our customers' energy needs?
with the power plant out, yes. No.
So this gets a little detailed here, but from an energy perspective, we have plenty of resources to serve the energy that we need for the year, right, for in any given year. What we're seeing happening on the system, and this is why it was important to take ownership of the DWR units, is we're seeing our system get very peaky, right? And so our peaks have gone up notably over the last several years, and we expect that to continue. But when you look at energy and the amount of energy the community is consuming, that's been relatively stable. So what we're procuring, when we go out and procure, there's two things we're looking at. We're making sure we've got adequate capacity to meet that summer peak, right? So there's enough steel in the ground, if you will, to serve the load on, September 6th. And then the other procurement is largely around meeting these renewable requirements, right? Making sure that the color of the electrons fall into the right buckets. And so energy consumption has been relatively flat, but we've gotten peaky, and that's where the focus on reliability, the peaking units that we just acquired, the peaking units hopefully at Roseville Power Plant number 2 we can reinvest in, because that's more of what we're going to need when we look at the reliability, but also we need to procure the right type of resources, and that gets to this RPS procurement. We took a 10-year agreement to council just a couple months ago on the Shell deal Petra mentioned. We have, I think, a project that looks very viable here locally to deliver renewable and solar, so we'll look at that. And we're also paying close attention to solicitations that are happening with some of our joint action agencies that we're part of through the balancing area of Northern California Power Agency, where there's opportunity to jointly purchase or jointly develop, we're doing that. And so we are procuring in those lanes is what I would say. And then, related to that, we're watching carefully that what's happening in the community, both residential new construction and kind of the build out of the city, but also making sure that we're not a pinch point for any meaningful commercial or industrial company or customer that would come to Roseville. So we want to make sure we have adequate capacity with the necessary reserves to keep up with what's coming down the pike. And so we are procuring to meet peak demand and then obviously to meet the regulatory requirements for the mandates. And I think, if I may, real quick, Commissioner, I think what you said is exactly what we're doing with this update to our cost containment mechanism and our rules here, our procedures. We're trying to walk the line here, right, of we're rule followers here in Roseville. We're not, our council hasn't set stretch goals for us like other utilities to be at the tip of the sword on renewable procurement. But we strive to meet the regulatory requirements in the state. And it is, the next compliance period is, we've learned in other utilities is pretty challenging. And so, there's some organizations that are being forced to buy compliance at all costs, right? And that's all that matters. So for us, that's not really the guidance and the model we have here and the policy set by our council. And so we want to manage upward pressure on costs the best we can while meeting the regulatory requirements. So we're trying to balance that. This cost containment mechanism has always existed, but we haven't seen the problems in the market previously that we're seeing in the next several years. And so we're just using the regulatory mechanism to manage costs. We're still going to evaluate renewable procurement, and if something makes sense for us going forward here in the next several years, we'll still do it. But we don't want to be caught in a situation where it's compliance at all costs when it doesn't make sense for the community, it doesn't make sense for our customer base, and there is a regulatory mechanism that allows us to look at it differently for a while. So that's where
I appreciate you articulating the policy behind this. That was important for me to hear, and I think it's good for the public to hear, and I agree with it personally. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Okay. So anyone from the public would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Okay. All right. Thank you, Petra, and thank you, Sean. All right. Board member, commissioners, staff reports. Next on the agenda is board member, commissioner, staff reports. Are there any reports from the staff? Questions or comments from the commission?
Nope.
Does anyone have any items they would like to suggest for future commission meetings? The mind is at this point.
This item that we just covered, it's sort of continuing, right? And I would like to have it brought back at appropriate times and keep us up to date on it.
And then we can bring it up, possible next projects, what we are working on or what's going to council, so we will keep you in the loop.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. So we're finalizing the specific mechanics of this mechanism, and so we didn't share all that, but we will be taking that to council at the end of the December 18th meeting, and we're glad to come back and discuss the details, some of the details that we're still assessing right now.
If I just made one more comment, so it was asked, I think, at the last meeting, so we usually have the power content label that goes out to customers, and that sometimes shows that our renewable requirement, it's not, the percentage is not exactly what the requirement is. So we're going to start doing a disclaimer over there that that accounting methodology, it's totally different from the RPS accounting methodology. So we do meet all the regulatory requirements. It's just the accounting, it's different. So we will start making that disclaimer because I think it has caused confusions in the past.
All right, well, before we adjourn, I would just like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. I want to thank the staff for all that you do. Thank you for tolerating my efforts at chairing. And happy holidays to all, and we'll see everybody next year. So, okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Second? Okay, we are adjourned.